Welcome back to Horsemen Sports, where today we continue division debates with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is the end of the AFC South. We've gone through everybody else, given record predictions, and up to this point, you can probably have a pretty good idea if you watch those videos, pretty good idea of what I think of the Jaguars this season. So starting off, they had a 9-8 record in 2022. And in the AFC in 2022, that was good enough for them to be able to make the playoffs. And if you ask me, did they get better this offseason? Yeah. Yeah, I think they got better this offseason. Because you look at what did they do this offseason? What moves did they make to become a better football team? First of all, you got to think they traded for Calvin Ridley last season, but they're getting him in this season, right? He was suspended all of last season, but, knowing that he was probably going to be playing again, they traded for him, and it's going to work out. They were able – obviously, they have Christian Kirk, gave him a big-time deal last year for $18 million a year, but then they also have Zay Jones. They were able to re-sign Evan Ingram. So keeping all these pass catchers around Trevor Lawerence is going to be a key factor to the Jaguars' success this season. And then adding Calvin Ridley to that is just going to make him that much more dangerous. I think people, they really underestimated Christian Kirk. And if you watched any of our videos last season in division debates, specifically talking about the Jaguars, I tried to tell people that Christian Kirk was going to be worth the $18 million the Jaguars were paying him. And he showed that he is capable of being that guy last season. So coming into this season, him and Calvin Ridley are going to be a deadly 1-2 punch. And again, adding Zay Jones and that Evan Ingram at tight end, who's one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. So the offense there, just in the passing game, is going to be very dangerous. And there are probably going to be some people that see this and say, oh, well, Calvin Ridley's been struggling in the training camp so far, but I feel like that's to be expected, right? He's coming off of not playing an entire season. So I feel like to be expected, there's going to be some rust that has to be knocked off, but he's going to be back to being himself sooner rather than later. He's still fairly young for a receiver, and he's been very productive, even as a number 2 wide receiver in his career. So I expect Calvin Ridley to be just fine and to be exactly what the Jaguars passing game needed this season. Then if you look further than the receivers, right, look at the running game. Doug Peterson's coach, the running backs matter. They were able to sign D'Ernest Johnson. Some people may know that name. Some people may not. He's been a part of the Browns organization and has had, some playing time. Obviously, they've had Nick Chubb. They've had Kareem Hunt. So he hasn't always had a lot of playing time. But when, usually Kareem Hunt is the one missing time, when he was there and when that was happening, D'Ernest Johnson was getting some time and he was able to make the most of it. A lot of people that play fantasy football know the name D'Ernest Johnson because he was effective for the Browns when he had to be. So that's a good depth piece to bring in, good name to have on the roster right there. But the one that I think is the biggest name this offseason in the running back department is Tank Bigsby. We know Travis Etienne's on the roster, but Tank Bigsby was drafted by the Jaguars, and that was an amazing pickup. I'm not a big college football fan, so I don't watch a whole lot of college football until guys are drafted, and then I have to figure out, okay, is this guy going to be good or is he not, right? So when you go back and look at the tape, of course, you can't just look at the highlights, right? You got to go and look at, some of the bad plays and see what was happening. And when I look at Tank Bigsby, it just screams out like he should be a number 1 running back on a team somewhere. Maybe not immediately, which is, the situation that he's coming into is great for him, which is why I'm so high on him. But, in a year or two, we're going to see Tank Bigsby and think this guy at some point, either him or Travis Etienne are going to be on a different team because you're not paying both of them, right? So Tank Bigsby coming in, the role that he'll have is more that, goal line and short yardage work, those things are going to be his specialty because Travis Etienne wasn't great in those situations in 2022. And I could see, D'Ernest Johnson, if he stays on the roster, they also have JaMycal Hasty. So it'll be interesting to see who they keep. But ultimately, I expect Tank Bigsby to really take more of a featured role in this offense behind Travis Etienne. And I just saw a report earlier today before I'm recording this on Monday, August 7th. I saw that Tank Bigsby has actually been balling out at training camp And a lot of people are thinking that the role that he's going to have on the team is bigger than what people were expecting when he was drafted, which is what I've been trying to tell people this offseason. Some of my friends that play fantasy football talking about, running backs in Dynasty. And I've tried to bring up Tank Bigsby. Not a lot of people are on him because of Travis Etienne and everything that goes on there. But Tank Bigsby is very, very good. And I expect him to be good for the Jaguars, especially in that Doug Peterson offense that is tailor-made for running backs. Okay, so with the offense out of the way, I don't have much for the defense. What I will say about this Jaguars defense is that I think they can have a good pass rush, but I think they're going to struggle in the secondary. So they're going to need that pass rush to kind of counteract what they're lacking in the secondary. They've lost guys in free agency over the last couple of years, traded away CJ Henderson. So they're young, they're inexperienced, they're not deep. So on the back end, they could have some issues. But again, pass rush, I think, could be really good for the Jaguars this year with, obviously Josh Allen leading that group. But the guys that they've drafted over the last couple of years have shown flashes. And if they can get consistency from those guys, they can be one of the best pass rush groups in the NFL. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and look at some of the Jaguars' schedule and get to a record prediction. So starting with week 2, it's going to be at home against the Chiefs. And this is on the list because the Jaguars lost to the Chiefs in November of last season, and then they lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs. After coming back against the Chargers, and that amazing comeback, they end up losing to the Chiefs in the divisional round of the playoffs. Plus, these are two teams that I expect to be very good this season, definitely winning their division this season. So at the end of the day, this game could end up being pretty vitally important to tiebreakers for the number 1 seed. The Jaguars, I honestly think the Jaguars could be that good this season. So it's going to be really important for the Jaguars to be able to win this game. And even though I have the Jaguars beating the Colts in week 1, I do have the Chiefs going into Jacksonville and beating the Jaguars in week 2. All right, and then you go 1 week ahead. Week 3 versus the Texans. It's another home game for the Jaguars. And it's going to be the first time seeing Trevor Lawerence versus CJ Stroud. Now, Jaguars, admittedly, could end up stomping the Texans. That's totally possible. But again, this is noteworthy because it's T-Law versus CJ Stroud for the first time. Okay, and then weeks 4 and 5, where you have Jacksonville having back-to-back England games. And just for reference, week 4, it's the Falcons. Week 5, it's the Bills. And this is noteworthy because there's so many jokes about the Jaguars being transferred to England and just being England's team at some point because they're there every single season. And now they have them going back-to-back weeks. So, maybe this is going to be a regular thing. Maybe Jacksonville getting multiple weeks in a season. Every season is going to be a normal thing. And, hey, maybe at some point they get an entire month to just chill in England. And maybe they can do go to England. I think they play those games in London, right? And then go over to Germany, and, just start bouncing around in different parts of Europe for an entire month and play football games in different parts of Europe, especially if the Jaguars are going to be good. Why not, right? But anyways, going up to week 10. Oh, by the way, these last 3 games, I have the Jaguars beating the Texans and the Falcons in weeks 3 and 4, but I do have them losing in week 5 to the Buffalo Bills. Okay, so week 10, they play the San Francisco 49ers. And this is going to be a good measuring stick game for the Jaguars at the midpoint in the season, right? Every team at the midpoint of the season, especially week 10, we're going to have a good idea of at least who's competing for the division, right? And who are the Jaguars going to be at this point. And up to their week 9 bye, I have them at 6-2. The only 2 games I have them losing are to the Chiefs and the Bills, who are going to be other powerhouse teams in the AFC, right? So coming back down to week 10 against the Niners, I do have the Niners winning this game. And Jaguars fans that are watching this are going to be mad that I have them losing to all these really good teams. Look, I think the Jaguars are going to be competitive, really competitive. I think they're going to be really good. But these are really good football teams, right? And, we've seen what the Chiefs can do. Obviously, the 49ers, sure, they are in a bit of a quarterback situation, but they always have a quarterback situation. And they're always a really good football team. So I have to pick them there, But I do think the Jaguars are going to be really good, and they're here we go. I didn't even notice that I did this. So go to week 18. okay, at the Titans. If the Titans are keeping up with the Jags at this point, then this Week 18 game could end up deciding the division. But because I have the Jags losing to the Chiefs in Week 2, so they don't own the tiebreaker there, and I also have the Jags easily winning this division by Week 18, in my opinion, there's a good chance the Jags are going to sit their starters, which is going to open the door for the Titans to win. Okay, so I once again have the Jags losing another game. Okay, I've mentioned what, 1, 2, 3, 4 games to you that the Jags have lost. And just for the record, those are the only 4 games that the Jags lose all season, in my opinion. I have them finishing 13-4. They have a really good football team. They have a good quarterback. They have a good coach. They play some really good teams, and those are the games that are really going to impact their record. But the AFC South as a whole is pretty weak. As a Colts fan, I have the Colts finishing 7-10. I have the Texans winning 5 games this year. The Titans end up with 11 wins, so they're competitive. But ultimately, outside of those powerhouse teams, they have the Saints, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns, and the Ravens. I have them beating all those teams, right? So you can call me out for, having them lose to a couple of really good teams, but I also have them beating a couple teams that I have having really good records this year. So all in all, again, Jaguars are a good football team, and I have them finishing 13-4. I would love to know what your prediction is for the Jaguars this season. What do you think of them? You let me know down in the comments section, and let's talk about it. Okay, and don't forget to subscribe and keep coming back every day for more division debates as we lead into the NFL season. Tomorrow's episode is going to be Dallas Cowboys as we start with the NFC East. And until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I'll see you for the next video.